What about chat? Beautiful. Here we go. Shit. 9.5 hours late, but there we go. We've got it going. Just turn the volume up. Excellent. Right. Okay. So, live stream's a little bit later than expected. Yeah. Apologies. It's called a hangover. Right. Let's see what we've got here. Obviously, these are some of the stories that are going on in sport right now. You've got the NHL season starting next week. Pre-season's now over. Players have been assigned to the AHL and the ECHL. Players have been waived. There's still a few free agents out there, and there are some contracts to be sorted out. Billy Slater's retired from the NRL in a losing performance for the Melbourne Storm, and there was question marks whether he should play in the NRL Grand Final against the Sydney Roosters because of a shoulder charge. But is what it is. Jose Mourinho and Man United and what's going on there, we don't really know. The feud not only between Pogba but I think other players is really boiling. I think he's losing the dressing room. I think he's not long for the Man United hot seat. Hearts continue at the top of the Scottish Premier League. They've had a brilliant start to the season. They've only dropped 2 points so far, so they fully deserve to be where they are. Europe have won the Ryder Cup in golf. Most of the hard work when it comes to the Ryder Cup was done on day 2 and day 3 by Europe, and they deserve to win. And Tiger Woods has found out that he's not as good as he was. Colin Turkins has won the British Touring Car Championship for the third time with a race to spare, and NASCAR is racing at the Roval Charlotte road course for the first time, and that's been chaotic and crash-laden practices. There's a tyre wall that's causing controversy. There's been some big shunts, and these cars are technically stock cars. They're saloon cars in a sense, like similar to touring cars, but they go 100, I would say, 60 mile an hour faster than a touring car. They go faster than F1 cars. The F1 is taking place in Russia. We could look at some other stuff. I am going to do a video on last night's Bracknell Bees game after this, so fear not, there will be a match review after that, a day late and a dollar short probably, but we'll do that later. But let's go through stuff. So the NHL season is starting next week on the 3rd of October, so it's starting on Wednesday. The pre-season has been very, very interesting. A lot of these young rookies have got a lot of game time. Some of the fixturing has been criticised by some of the teams and how they've got to how they had to play their games. It's going to be an interesting season. There's been a lot of movement in the summer. Some really big players like Carlson and Tavares have moved teams, Pacioretty and Stasny. So this NHL season is going to be really, really interesting. I have no doubt. I'm not going to go into too much depth from the NHL really at this point. But the preseason, there has been some really good play played. We've seen a couple of suspensions in the preseason as well, which is a surprise. The Department of Player Safety is again going to be scrutinised this season in the NHL, and they are targeting slashing penalties. So let's see if they carry that on into the regular season. Billy Slater, now he was, he's retired now from rugby league. There was a big question mark over that shoulder charge in the NRL semi-final before the grand final. Other players have been suspended for less. There was a big controversy: should he play? But he ended up on the losing side to the Sydney Roosters, and was playing obviously against Cooper Cronk, former teammate at Melbourne Storm. So that's an interesting subplot. I don't have much to say on it. The NRL, it's been very difficult to really follow this season over in the UK unless you pay silly amounts of money or try to legally live stream it, and it's difficult. And they are 11 hours ahead. But Billy Slater retiring from the NRL is a big moment for the league and for Australian rugby league in general, because he's dominated the fullback position for both Australia and his club side and his state for over a decade. The last couple of years, he's had a few injuries, mostly to his shoulder. But Billy Slater stepping aside means there's going to be a lot of fullbacks now putting their hand up to play for Queensland. And for Australia in the green and gold. So that's going to be really interesting to see, if Cameron Munster can really seize the day at Melbourne Storm, and also who's going to seize the day, for Queensland in state of origin. Who's going to seize the day? Who's going to be the player who nails down the fullback role for the green and gold Kangaroos in the rugby league international side. It's going to be interesting, and I will do a video on Billy Slater and then some of the controversies about Billy Slater and other bits and pieces. The Jose Mourinho thing. I'll get to your questions in a minute. I just want to go through each point. Jose Mourinho, obviously, this week has had a tough week. Obviously, the defeat of Derby County on penalties, and being in the lead in that game, and then being 2-1 down at Old Trafford to then get it back to 2-2, and then losing on penalties. Ironically, Phil Jones missed the penalty. English player taking a penalty in a knockout game. It's not a good idea. But his feud with Pogba and possibly other players, several players have been critical of Jose Mourinho. I think I am seeing parallels of his second spell at Chelsea, which didn't end on the happiest of notes, if people remember a couple of years ago. I don't think Jose Mourinho sees out the season. And I think Pogba is on the way out if this continues. The fact that Pogba went to Juventus and was actually in the United system before he went to Juventus says something. I think Ed Woodward and the lack of investment in the transfer market. Mourinho has been very critical of club transfer policy. There's a lot going on here at play. Mourinho doesn't actually live in Manchester. He still has a house in London and is basically staying out of a hotel on match nights. So it's a complicated situation behind the scenes. But on the pitch, the performances haven't been great, and I think United have regressed from where they were last year, finishing second, and the season before winning the Europa League. So I don't see United winning any trophies this season. And I'll answer a lot of questions on that. I'm expecting a lot of questions on the Mourinho situation. Hearts at the top of the SPL was good for Scottish football in the long term, not the short term, because the short term Celtic didn't qualify for the Champions League, which has now led to problems in the League Cup semi-final scheduling and the UEFA coefficient. But Hearts at the top of the SPL and playing really well while doing it is good to see. Obviously, Europe today have just won the Ryder Cup, and that is brilliant. To see with the current political climate in Europe, that's good to see some European unity there. But Turkey, I've just watched the touring cars all day. Part of the reason why this live stream is in the evening, not the morning. And Colin Turkington did it with a race to spare. He didn't win it by much. It was a very tight season. Record number of winners, 17 separate winners in 30 races. That's basically over half the competition field won a race this year, and even more of them got on the podium as well. So it's a record-breaking year for the British touring cars in its 60th season. And the NASCAR races at Charlotte Motor Speedway on the road course have been controversial. The free practice sessions and the Truck and Xfinity series have raised a lot of questions about the design of the course and safety. A lot of crashes in free practice, a lot of crashes in qualifying. Some of them are really serious high-speed accidents. Yes, the cars are exceptionally safe in NASCAR these days. Probably one of the safest series to actually race in motorsport. But big concerns have been raised about how many cars will finish today. So that's going to be really, really interesting to see the full race rerun in a couple of days when NASCAR on YouTube uploads the whole race, because we can't stream here in the UK, which is a bit annoying. But I'll be watching that, and I will have my thoughts on the Charlotte Roval road course, because I haven't actually seen the full course yet. But turn 12 looks lethal. So let's go over to your questions. The Asia Cup, I have sort of followed the results, but there was it's been well advertised here in the UK on the TV. There was a way to stream it if you paid a amount of money, but I wasn't willing to pay for watching cricket because, for me, yes, I do love the short formats of the game. I love all formats of the game, but if I'm honest, it's not a sport that I watch this time of year. I think September, October, I don't really watch cricket. I watch ice hockey. I watch rugby union. I watch the end of the rugby league season if I can. Fortunately, I didn't get to watch much of the NRL this season for reasons that are difficulty and work and timings. It's a bit annoying. I have followed it in bits. It has been advertised, which is weird. It was advertised to a British audience, even though it's the subcontinental side's playing. So that was interesting. It also says to me that the Sri Lankans are going to be more match ready for England than England expect. I think this will help the Sri Lankan side prepare for England because they're getting that little bit of extra match time in as a unit. It will give us Sri Lankan selectors a few questions to look at about who to select for the Sri Lanka England series that's coming up in a couple of months. So that's going to make the England Sri Lanka series very, very interesting. Yes, Swindon did beat Telford last night. Again, British ice hockey. I'm gonna do a video on the Bracknell Bees game that I watched last night. Hence, where I got this new hoodie from. The game against Invicta was allowed to flow. I don't mind it when officials allow the game to flow. I don't. But what I do not particularly like is when an official doesn't know the rule book correctly or is actually refereeing the game really badly. If you're going to let the game flow, at least call the really serious, dirty play. And I wasn't seeing a lot of that last night. The officiating standard by the referee, and I will admit she's not. She was a female, and she wasn't a regular referee on the on that I've seen before. I have a full review video to do. The final result was 5-1 at Bracknell, but it were both sides. Invicta are known as being a physical side. That's their game plan: is to be physical, rough it up, and try and put a more skillful side off their game. Bracknell have got all the skill players now with the acquisition of Doug Shepherd as coach from the Basingstoke Bison, and with some of the skill players that have been brought in to the Bracknell team, with some of the physical players as well. It's more of a balanced game by Bracknell. Yeah, there were some big hits going in. And one of the worst ones that I saw, even though it was actually, I would say, a 50-50, was Josh Martin getting checked into the boards. Clearly, his head or shoulder made a significant contact with the plexi. He managed to retain the puck somehow, and a fair bit of forecheck doing it. And he managed to get on shot a goal and then skated straight off at the end of the first period and did not come back for the next 2 periods of play and didn't. I think he was concussed. Now, it's a 50-50 call. I'm not angry that it wasn't cool, but he was hurt. He was hurt. You could see he was visibly hurt. And yeah, he's a hard player. He's an agitator. He will drop the gloves. But when maybe the excessive force could have been a boarding penalty not called. There were several knee on knee deliberate attempts to hit knee on knee that weren't called. That's when I have issues. So the standard of refereeing, I think, needs to improve, not just in the National League, but also in the Elite League. There was issues last year with the Department of Player Safety, and there were issues along the lines of some of the calls being made across the board weren't great. Ice hockey's growing. The TV deal with Free Sports, which is the junior channel of Premier Sports, is we're going to see what happens over the next couple of years. I can see the Elite League growing. I can see Hull, Bracknell, and Peterborough taking that step up because they've got the arena size, they've got the fan base, and they now all of them seem to have the money behind to make that next step. And with the TV deal, that will help. But the only way the sport can be taken more seriously is a lot of these teams are doing, getting young people involved by giving free tickets or half price tickets away at local schools and youth clubs, which Bracknell Bees have been doing, and I know other teams have been doing as well. Which means you get that new audience in. And at the same time, the TV deal will help. Sky's the limit. I think if other sports have issues, ice hockey can pick up, but there are things that ice hockey in this country, and bearing in mind when I call it hockey, I mean ice hockey because I have Canadian and American viewers. I do think the sport in this country has a long way to go, but Liam Kirk getting drafted by the NHL and Ben O'Connor going to Sweden to play is a step in the right direction. The one problem I have is it mostly seems to be the Sheffield area that's breeding a lot of the good players. I think you need to have more players coming up from all over the country. I think the Elite League needs to expand in the south. That's where I think Peterborough and Bracknell come into the possible Elite League expansion. They need a team in London. Could the Raiders, because they have got a bit of money now in a decent new arena, could they also be approached to bring another team into the south of the UK? I know travel is going to be an issue because there's teams from Northern Ireland, Wales, and Scotland, but that's something to consider. It's the only league which is fully UK national. The football leagues, the rugby leagues, both union and league are national leagues, so it's a bit more difficult. The League One and League Two, there isn't much money in football at the lower levels. I'm going to admit that straight up. But football's oversaturated the market with the TV deal. I think that's a problem. Plus, you also want to sell overseas. If you can't sell these games overseas, it's not going to make enough money for League One and League Two. Um, Partly because the League One and League Two teams have smaller fan bases for the most part, although you are some big sides down there like Bradford City and Notts County, for example, that do have actually surprisingly large fan bases for the leagues they're in. So viewership is who's going to want to watch Yeovil Exeter unless you are from Somerset and Devon, which is not necessarily the most people you could find, and their fan bases aren't big. I'm just using them as examples. I've got a friend who used to live right by Exeter's ground in Exeter, and my cousin is a Yeovil fan. How many people, not only in this country but abroad, want to watch Yeovil Exeter? And I'm saying that with love, and I'm not trying to, you know. Uh, put a downer on those sides because they're historical teams. They're very vital. With England players now have played for those clubs, but I think the amount of oversaturation of the sports market with football, I think, is causing a lot of problems. Um, but maybe yes, they should maybe have one game a week or 2 games a week on free to air or even possibly subscription TV. Um, Maybe have a channel dedicated on the Sky package. I'm not a fan of Sky, but the Comcast takeover, we'll see what happens in the next couple of years with the restructuring of Sky. Um, well, WWE, is on Sky. The Impact Zone, Impact Wrestling, formerly TNA, is on free to air on Freeview. So we do have professional wrestling on British TV, and we have a big fan base for pro wrestling in the UK. It's a big fan base, and we produce many wrestlers that have wrestled in TNA and WWE and WCW back in the day. We already have that interest here. That there is a long-standing interest in sports entertainment. It is not a sport. Even Vince McMahon has admitted that. But there are issues within pro wrestling that have been ongoing for quite some time, and WWE is losing market share as more and more issues within the structure of WWE, and more things come out about the Attitude Era and before with steroids. And I will do videos on Vince McMahon and WWE for various reasons. I'm got to do a lot of research on that. But when I was a kid, there was the steroids trial where he was called to testify in front of a federal court, and it basically all came out that they were doping the performers, and it's claimed the lives of some of my favorite wrestlers. So that is an interesting topic. Um, Basketball, it depends. Yes, I know there are friends of mine who are NBA fans. I watch the occasional game, partly for the channel's purposes, not really necessarily because I necessarily enjoy basketball. I'm more of a casual viewer. If there's no ice hockey on that night, no NHL game that I can watch, I will watch an NBA game if I can. But again, because the NBA is North America, we're 5 to 8 hours ahead, depending on what coast of the US or Canada you're on. And yeah, it's not my favorite sport. I understand why people enjoy it. It is fast paced, and high scoring, and there is a fair bit of skill involved. But for me, I was more interested in basketball in the mid-90s with films like Space Jam and Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls. I lost interest when so Clive Woodward took over as England rugby coach, and we had the Rugby World Cup in 1999 in Wales, and then obviously 2003 England won the World Cup down in Australia. That's when I think my interest for the NBA and basketball really went, and I didn't enjoy playing it. I have to enjoy playing a sport as well to get into it. Ice hockey, yeah, I don't play, but I have friends who play, so I was always supporting them at various points through my youth. And even now, some of my friends play ice hockey, so I've always had an interest in that sport. But basketball, it is debatable whether it will always whether how much growth we can get. Yes, the Boston Celtics have played home games at the O2, but there's a lot of debate about the international series in basketball. The NFL, obviously, the Jacksonville Jaguars are trying to buy Wembley. That's slowly taking a step closer, but it can still be, the deal can still collapse. There are a lot of issues within that. And they did ask the Boston Celtics, the richest team, one of the richest teams in pro sports, is there any chance of having any major league franchise from North America coming to Europe or the UK? And the answer was no. So if the Jacksonville Jaguars actually want to play over in the UK, they may find some opposition from fans and the other league owners. Well, the Murrayfield Racers, the ownership group, you can take a step up. It's not the team, because obviously there's going to be all the imports. The team that they have now, obviously would not be able to compete at Elite League. They'll be slaughtered. But I think there were various reasons why the Elite League ownership decided to reject the application for the Murrayfield Races. Bear in mind that the Murrayfield Ice Rink is built in like 1936, 37, so it's pre-World War II. It's nearly 80 years old, if not 80 years old. That is an issue. There are other issues at play. I think they wanted to stabilise the league. That they've lost a team, but they have got this TV deal, and they don't want to have another team come in that is just going to get slaughtered. Edinburgh only, I think, twice got to the playoffs, and only once had a full winning season. So I think they wanted to get Milton Keynes and Guildford into the second year. And Milton Keynes were the weaker of the two new sides in the Elite League, and I think they may have, they were planning this long term to get those two sides in to keep it an even league. I think Hull have been put on tender. I think Peterborough and Bracknell also would make it a nice even league on teams, and it will create more interest in the south of the UK where there's a lot of money. And if you want to get a sport to grow, you need money. As rugby league is now finding, because they're mostly northern based, there's not as much money in the north of England than in the south of England, and I think they're regretting not supporting necessarily the London Broncos and more back in the 90s and the 2000s to try and keep them as competitive as possible to grow the interest. Stoke in the Championship, I haven't. Well, as a Blackburn fan, I'm quite happy with how my team are doing. Stoke in the Championship is an interesting one. Their season last year in the Premier League wasn't great. Obviously, the FA Cup defeat to Coventry, I think, set the tone for the rest of the season up to this point. Basically, I think the defeat to Coventry last year in the FA Cup, or last season in the FA Cup, has set the tone until now. I think they're not going to bounce back this season. I think that's first up. I don't think it's going to be a quick fix. I think a couple of seasons in the Championship to stabilise and reassess is what's like need. But with the amount of problems with debt in football, which is it's been heavily overlooked by the media, is you got to look at the fact that in the Championship, now this is the league that Stoke are now in. Only I think three or five sides 2 years ago made a profit, and none of those sides were in the playoff places. The Stoke ownership, the Stoke board, I think stabilisation is the key. You're not. I mean, I don't want to abuse Stoke. I mean, I was very critical of a few bits and pieces, and when I did a video on Stoke City, I gave them an extra 2 years in the Premier League, and I got abused for that. I was like, well, hang on a second, I'm giving 2 extra by accident. Read my numbers wrong. I think lack of investment in the squad, letting key players go or not signing key players on to contract extensions was part of the problem. So again, with Man United and Jose Mourinho, the transfer market did Stoke. Bear in mind, this is a team that got to an FA Cup final and played in Europe in their time in the Premier League. I think it's a very similar situation to Mourinho and Man United. Is the transfer market that was one of the problems, and I think possibly having the wrong. Berahino, for example, what has he actually done? He wanted to go like Man City or Liverpool, when he ended up after his time at West Brom doing nothing for 2 years. That's the amount of effort and energy put into getting Sadio Berahino, who has been nothing but a failure. And I think it's down to the player's attitude. It's not down to skill level. I think it. I think it's a player's attitude, and I think the dressing room wasn't right. And yeah, you may have a decent squad for whatever level of football you play at. And Stoke did have a decent squad last year, but I think the transfer market dealings, they lost. There were several key players that they They couldn't keep, and some of the players they brought in didn't perform. But there's always that argument, oh, such and such a club is too big to get relegated. No club is too big to get relegated. Very few clubs are left that have never been relegated from the top division. Manchester United have actually played in the second tier of English football, and people tend to forget that. There was a period of time when Man United wasn't a very good side, and now we're getting to another stage of Man United not being a good side. Stoke, I think it'll take a couple of years. There's going to be some adjustment. The fear I have, and I have this with every side that gets relegated from the Premier League, is they will tumble through the divisions. I've seen it so many times, so many clubs, and I will do a video on the first season of the Premier League and where those clubs that helped set up the Premier League, where they are now, and you will be surprised. Yeah, I did not know that Glanford Park in Scunthorpe is a year older than me. But again, stadiums have changed a lot since, well, Hillsborough basically. There was a report, and all-seater stadiums have come in. A lot of stadiums have changed or been completely redeveloped. A lot of clubs have got some new stadiums that they didn't have. It is interesting, and I'll have to, obviously, it's all about researching and learning. There's a lot of stuff I don't know about sport. The fact that I do enjoy my research videos, and occasionally, yeah, I get my numbers wrong. I may, being dyslexic, it's kind of fun trying to read, but I always enjoy learning new stuff, and I'm more than happy. I've got to do a history video on Malmo at some point this evening, and I've left this live stream really late, which has really annoyed me. I've now got to research, Malmo Football Club in Sweden, for a subscriber who did request it, and I did say yes, I would have a look, but I've sort of let that slip a little bit today, which is my fault. But I've got to look into that, and I don't know much about the Swedish football league, but I'm going to be looking into it in about an hour and a half's time. Yes, the Championship is a hard league to get out of. I think there are a lot of problems with the Championship, and I will say this in the sense that it's not a financially stable league for the clubs that are in it. You either, if you get relegated, it's a financial hit. If you get promoted, to the amount of money you got to spend to get promoted, you actually make a loss. So even with the prize money, the Championship is a financially badly run league. It is exceptionally brutal. It is a cutthroat league. I haven't done a video on the Championship as a whole league. I think football in this country, well, in the whole of the UK, needs to look at salary caps for each league. Definitely look into capping agents' fees. It may sound really communist, but it's one of the few ways I think the football is going to become more financially stable. There are so many clubs in financial difficulty. There are so many clubs on the facing administration or liquidation or winding up orders every season, and a lot of it goes unheard of until they can't strike an agreement with the creditors, and the creditor goes, "Well, we're going to get the bailiffs in," and that's where we found out about Bolton Wanderers being in worse trouble than they actually were. But yes, the Championship is an exceptionally hard league to get back out of. But it's also an exceptionally hard league if you're new to it to get used to. The amount of teams that get promoted up and also find it difficult to acclimatise to the style of football and the necessity of getting out of that league to get to the riches of the Premier League, which is actually a flawed concept because the amount of money you have to spend to get promoted means you make a loss, even with the prize money. But that is a question I wasn't expecting. Was about the I wasn't expecting a question about the Championship. An individual club, yes. If a manager got sacked or a player was suspended for something, then yes, absolutely, I could answer a question on that and have my view on it. The Championship as a whole entity, I do think there are structural, behind the scenes financial issues with how it's win or get nothing. Well, at least you're positive about it. I don't know how long it's going to take. There are look at Leeds. The season before they were relegated from the Premier League, they were Champions League semi-finalists. They got relegated out of the Premier League when I was still in secondary school. So that's going back over 15 years. It's taken Leeds a very long time, and they end up in League One at one point. Leeds are at the top of the table, and we have to give them credit for where they are. But they had a lot of money problems. They had a lot of financial difficulties for quite some time. And we're not in October. I mean, October is tomorrow. 1st of October is tomorrow. So, we can have a see where teams are. At some point this week, we'll have a look at what I call the promotion race. So I'll look at the top half of the championship, and we can discuss what teams I think go up, what teams I think get into the playoff mix, and what teams will miss out on the playoff places. That's the best bet I can do. I've got to go look at a lot of form books and a few and fixture lists possibly. And I think, okay, this is where I think a team can go. The relegation from the championship, I think, because the championship is such an unpredictable league, a team can go on a run of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games unbeaten, and that completely jumbles everything up. Because there's obviously it's a bigger league than the Premier League. There's more games. It's crazy fixturing. There's a lot of mid. But all you got to do is win 3 or 4 games on the bounce, and suddenly you're sixth. It's more close. It's closer in the middle blob than people realise. But at the same time, you get on a bad run, for example, and you drop like a stone. So we'll have to see where teams are at. As I said about the Scottish Premiership by Christmas, we can look at individual teams or regional leagues around Europe again by the opening of the transfer window, and that gives an idea of where teams are at. Yeah. But it's your first season out of the Premier League. It's an adjustment. There's a different style of football being played. There's more games. Your squad depth's getting tested. Some of the big name players have left, so it's a new look squad for the most part. It's an adaptation process. That's plain and simple. Hopefully, you're stable mid-table. If you get back in the playoffs, that's great. That's a couple of extra games, more revenue. If you get to a playoff final, it's even better. If you win the playoff final, that's quite a bit of money, and you bounce straight back up. But very few teams do the down and up. I think Newcastle, both times they've been relegated from the Premier League, they bounced up at the first attempt, but it's a rare feat. And people are, no promotion relegation system is perfect. I think a simple system that we have now sort of makes sense to a point. But it is, it's very different. Revenues are less. Attendances are, for the most part, less capacity of stadiums, and it's a different style of football. It's completely different. I have been to some championship games, considering that I do live like a few miles from Reading, so I've been to some championship games over the years. I've been at Watford when they were in the championship. I've been to Reading. I've been at Brentford, so I've seen what is now League One and League Two football, and Brentford were at that level. So I've been to some lower league clubs. It's been a while since I've been to a Premier League game, but yeah, you can definitely see the difference in quality level from a Premier League side to a Championship, League One, League Two. You can, and it is very hard to bounce straight back up, no doubt. But let's go back to the board and let's see what we can discuss, because I can always add stuff to the board here, and we can discuss other points. Southampton. Well, I did a look at the Premier League where teams were in my Premier League predictions video. So if you feel free to have a look at my Premier League predictions video, because on the 31st of December I'm going to revisit or see where clubs are actually at, where I predict they finish. I do think there are some issues at Southampton. I do. I think they're underperforming for the players they've got. I don't think they get relegated. I think they're going to be a lower mid-table team. And that is about as much as I can tell you. I don't follow the Premier League as religiously as I did 5-10 years ago. I follow other sports far more closely and other leagues far more closely. But I do think, from everything I read and every highlights I see and the interviews given, what I'm getting a feeling about this club is they're not where they want to be. and I can see them at the top end, upper half of the lower half of the table. I can see them getting about anywhere between 15th and 12th. I think they will improve slightly over last season, and it's gonna take a time to get a squad together or get the group together behind an ideal to take them into the top half of the table and to take them that next step. Um, but yes, they haven't been great the last couple of years. There's various reasons behind that. Pochettino, I think, got lured away by the money and the option of Champions League coaching in the Champions League with Tottenham. But look at Tottenham; they haven't taken that next step either. So there are several teams that, for me, are not performing at the level that they could do. Um, and I've done a few videos in the Premier League. I follow. We haven't had many managerial sackings. This time last year, we already had a couple. We definitely had De Boer fired at Crystal Palace. We had more sackings this time last year than we have now. There was a lot of sackings in August and September. Um, so we've had less managerial changeover at this point, but I can see a lot of sackings happening. I'm going to look at the Mourinho situation and work out, is he going to be the first manager sacked, or is it going to be one of the guys like Neil Warnock or Rafa Benitez, for example, at the bottom end of the table? But the Man United story, that's attracting a lot of interest right now. The defeat to West Ham, the defeat to Derby County, sums up their worst start of the season since I was born. The year I was born was the last time they started a season this bad. It was 29 years ago. My birthday's in like what, uh, 3 months? This is the worst start they've had to a season in my entire life since I was born. So the Mourinho one, I think he's possibly losing the dressing room, and we can look at the, you know, we can look at the lack of action in the transfer window by Man United. Fred has been a decent signing, a good utility midfielder, and Lee Grant, 30-something journeyman goalkeeper. Uh, you know, yeah, that's the sum of Manchester United's investment in the transfer market. And when you have a manager publicly, even if it's slightly tongue in cheek, slagging off the transfer policy and the lack of investment in the squad, and not getting um, uh, the the investment he wants, hmm, it's not breeding well. It's very similar to Conte at Chelsea last season and Mourinho in his second spell at Chelsea as well. Um, but the Glazier family, since they've owned the club, have taken time over decisions. They're not popular owners by any stretch of the imagination with the amount of debt the club has, even though they're one of the biggest clubs in the world. But yeah, Ed Woodward is on very borrowed time as well. I think both Mourinho, Woodward, and even Pogba, I think all three of them could be gone by the end of the season. Um, Speaking of Samson, just turkeys have knees. Every animal has some kind of knee or ankle joint. So yeah, I guess. Um, Not that I really look at the anatomy of a bird. Um, Even though my family used to keep turkeys, so that's an interesting one. But never really paid attention. Imagine if Man United get relegated. Well, it's happened before with big clubs. Look at Nottingham Forest. Look at Leeds United. Too big to go down. Uh, Atletico Madrid in Spain have been relegated from La Liga, so it has happened to big clubs in leagues before. Big clubs have been relegated. Um, Hearts and Hibs have both been relegated out of the Scottish Premier League at various points even in their recent history. So a big club in a league can get relegated. I remember in the late 90s, everyone was saying Nottingham Forest are too big to get relegated. They're too good a side to go down, and they went down that season. So it's a difficult one, but I can see it. I don't. I mean, people forget that Manchester City were nearly end up in the third tier of English football uh, 2 decades ago. So you know, just because a club's got money doesn't mean it's necessarily well run. Um, you got to look over in Germany. There's some big German clubs that have ended up in the second tier. Um, you know, it does happen. And yes, Nottingham Forest may get promoted, and that would be good considering how bad Notts County are doing, and the fact that Notts County still haven't got out of the relegation. Yeah, Hamburg, yeah. Hamburg, Kaiserslautern, they've been relegated. Cologne, Stuttgart, I think now. Eintracht Frankfurt have a few times. Mönchengladbach, Sunderland, but Sunderland though have had patches where they're big club, small club, kind of like where they sit in the hierarchy. Their rivalry with Newcastle is why that rivalry sold games on TV, because it was so aggressive and so heated between the fans, the players, and the managers that it's good for TV. It's not necessarily good football. Um, but no, there are a lot of big clubs. Man United would be a shock to the system, but I can see it happening with if Mourinho is still in charge, I can see them struggling. I can. Chelsea have been relegated out of the top division before. You've had Nottingham Forest, Sheffield Wednesday apparently were too big to go down. You know, people forget that Swindon Town used to be in the Premier League. So there's been loads of ex-Premier League clubs that are now struggling in League One and League Two. Um, you know, it does happen. It does. I think I'm going to research the clubs that have never been relegated from the top tier of English football, and I believe Liverpool and Everton, I think, are two of them, and there's a couple of others, but there's not many. And Manchester United have been relegated, so obviously Aston Villa have. But yeah, there was a period of time where Man United were absolutely useless. And Alex Ferguson, this is why I find Manchester United very interesting. In Alex Ferguson's early days, including 29 years ago, when he nearly got sacked, when they were last this bad, they could have sacked him. They could have sacked him where he stood. Yeah, Bolton. I wouldn't say Bolton are a massive club, but they are a decent sized team. Um, there's a lot of teams that have been in the Premier League that have struggled in the lower divisions. And as a Blackburn fan, we made it as far as League One. Get in. But you've got to look at the wider picture. Manchester United, they've had managerial stability since 1986. In that time, they've had some shocking seasons, and that was in the early period of Alex Ferguson's time in charge. And then he got the players he wanted and developed the squad that were brilliant, got better, and then when the Premier League came along, it was ready for Premier League football, and then dominated the first half of the Premier League. Look how many titles they've won. Half the Premier League titles are in Manchester United's trophy cabinet. The 90s was Manchester United's decade, and I would say that the early 2000s there was a good, say, 16-year period where Man United were the best team in English football. Since Ferguson has retired, so the last 6-7 seasons, it hasn't been as good. Not gonna lie, the David Moyes experiment didn't work. Van Gaal, it was stuttering. They did obviously get a trophy in there, but it wasn't great. And then you've got to look at the Mourinho era. Again, one trophy in there, another final defeat, not great. Crashing out of another cup competition, really embarrassingly at home. Stuttering in the league, not winning a game for a while now. A couple of 2 games in a row, but they could have lost, against Watford as well. Open hostility between key players and the management. Yeah, I can see United struggling for a while unless they actually invest in the transfer market. But players are now seeing this is not an attractive option. They're seeing Manchester City and Liverpool and Tottenham and other clubs in the Premier League, if they are going to get signed by a Premier League club, as more attractive to go to than Manchester United. And that's part to do with the culture in the dressing room. And Manchester United have struggled to sign good players for quite some time compared to some of their rivals in the Premier League. You just got to look at it. There is an issue with Man United. Is it an image issue? Is it a culture in the club? Do the players go when they're scouting and having discussions with the agent? Does the agent give feedback going, I don't think you're going to enjoy it here? Because you've got to enjoy your job if you want to be as successful as possible. Enjoying your job helps immeasurably, in how you perform. You may have a crap job, but as long as you enjoy who you work with And to some extent, the job you actually do, you actually are more productive than if you're just good at something but you don't enjoy it. I can see with Pogba, he's not enjoying it. I can see with other players who are exceptionally look, to play at this level, you've got to be good. Whether it's the poor United side or not, to actually play top tier professional football, you have to have a certain level of decency. So many of these players do not look happy in the Manchester United dressing room. So there you go. It's a debating point whether I think it is down on Mourinho now. I think his feud with Pogba, he's trying to tell other players this guy's the problem when actually it's himself. That's the issue. But players don't look happy, and if you don't have a happy work environment, you're less productive. It's just simple fact. It's simple, research. Every time you look at a company that has poor morale, the service isn't great, and that's not sporting. If you look at a company that has poor morale, the customer service isn't great, the product on the production line isn't great, and the company doesn't do as well. If you have a happy, motivated workforce that's having a lot of positivity, you find the company more profitable, better to work for, better, customer loyalty is there, revenues are good, more successful. And with Man United, they're not a happy group. Plain and simple, they're not a happy group. So they're not achieving their potential. I still think it's the strongest Man United squad. I think it's one of the weakest Man United squads in my lifetime. But they're not happy. If you can get a manager who has a positive outlook and a positive attitude, or there is a positivity in there, they may lose games, but they will be, more positive in what they're doing. But I think it's the badge they wear on their shirt is also weighing them down. The expectation from a somewhat delusional fan base, I will say that, because they've won so many trophies, they expect success, even though the team is not good enough to deliver said success. It's the same up in Scottish football as well. Fans just automatically, because of the club that they support, they look at the history. Oh, we have to win every year. Obviously, the players obviously want to win every game, and you aim to be as competitive as possible. But you're not going to win every game, and you're not going to win every trophy you're competing for. It's simple. It's called law of averages. But you can have a very positive atmosphere around the team and not necessarily win every game. But it's a complicated one. But I think Jose Mourinho is more of a problem than Paul Pogba at Man United. That's my personal opinion on it. But yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, look at the topics I've got on the board. There's some really interesting things. The guy retiring from the sport he's playing. Good feel good story in a league. Positivity around a league starting. Controversy in a sport. I think that's a talking point. A guy winning his third title and doing it in a gentlemanly, consistent way. Tough year for Colin Turkington away from the racetrack. There's a lot of things going on. The passion that the European players showed against the Americans in the Ryder Cup. Positive, positive vibes here. I'm surprised I haven't got more questions on the Scottish Premier League, because I've done a lot of videos on the Scottish Premier League in the last couple of months. But look at Rangers. Look at the turnaround at Rangers. The Gerrard effect. New attitude, new outlook, more positive. May not have the best squad in Scotland, and it's not the best Rangers team ever, but they're playing well. And even when they lose, they're still actually playing better than last year. So the SPL, you got the Steven Gerrard effect at Rangers. Look at Brendan Rodgers at Celtic. Less positive, less happy. There's issues off the field with the Boyata contract. I know Boyata is still playing at the club, but there is that kind of lingering issue. They're not playing as well. It's simple logic. There's only so much you can do with skill alone. You need to have some kind of team unity and positivity and hard work ethic there. If the culture isn't right, the team doesn't play as well. It's plain simple. I haven't actually checked out the draw, but I think the League Cup doesn't fully get the coverage it should. It's still a cup competition. I think it should. They used to show it, at least the semi-finals and the final, on free-to-air TV. And cough. I'm not eating. Okay. Away. Getting interrupted because people don't know how to knock on a door. I think the The league, I call it. I will always call it the League Cup. I don't like this for sponsorship reasons. We have to call it this trophy. It's the League Cup in my eyes. I think it doesn't get the coverage it deserves. It used to have more games on free to air TV in the League Cup, and we don't have that anymore. Um, that's a problem. Um, the other issues with it is, are some of these fringe players going to get game time? Will the Premier League clubs take it seriously? Another issue there. Will the Premier League clubs actually take it seriously? It's a way into Europe. Um, you know that's something else. But has the way the European club competitions are done with the UEFA Cup or the Europa League now and the Champions League, does that devalue the League Cup and the FA Cup? Because the amount of times we see the Premier League side put out a weakened squad or make a load of changes, it's kind of devaluing it. For some clubs, it's their only way to win silverware, and get that European qualification. And yeah, it's always a good chance to give some of your squad players a go, but I do think there are a few issues with cup competitions. They're not as valued as they should be. Chelsea derby, yeah, Frank Lampard going to obviously back to Stamford Bridge with his derby side, and of course he beat his old manager in Mourinho. Now he's going back to his old club, give them a duffing. I can see Derby having a good cup run. There's been a few issues off the field with Derby County over the years, and Frank Lampard, much like Steven Gerrard, again, it's a new voice in the dressing room. He's obviously got Jody Morris with him, so he's not, completely out of his depth. He has got some, an ex-teammate from Chelsea there as well, who's been coaching for quite some time. That's going to be a tie of the round, I think. I haven't fully looked at the draw, but I do feel that the League Cup should be taken more seriously by some of the bigger sides. I'll be interested to see the Chelsea side that's put up, because Derby County against Man United put out their strongest side. They put out their strongest available squad. Frank Lampard was going putting out my strongest available team. It's a positive move. It'll be interesting to see what Sarri at Chelsea and Chelsea do with this League Cup tie against Derby. Whether they put out the strongest possible team, or they put out some of the youngsters and some of the fringe players. Oh, fuck off. Um, New York Red Bulls versus Atlanta. Atlanta averaged 70,000 a game. So the thing is with the MLS, the quality level isn't as good as it could be, and with La Liga wanting to take games to the US, and there's that big controversy with that, which is not going to go away anytime soon. And the fact that it's two Catalan clubs wanting to take the game to the US, I'm not sure if the MLS is going to be too happy with having a European league playing a regular season game on their turf. I'm not sure how that's going to end up. But the MLS they need to try and sell the game more overseas. And they need to possibly have a look at changing the rules on overseas players, because it's called the marquee player rule. How about you get more overseas players who may not be at the top level, but give them some overseas experience? Because you got to look at the MLS. The homegrown talent isn't quite there, and it's a very complicated structure. I think you should have an MLS 1 and MLS 2, like a promotion relegation system, but I cannot see, because it's franchised, how the owners would be happy to pay money to be in a lower league. It's the franchise system. That's one of the reasons why it's holding the football back. It's not a club system; it's franchise. So it's the North American style of um, of sport. So that's not necessarily the way that the game could be at its best. Yes, Celtic did win yesterday. They scrapped a win against Aberdeen 1-0. They're not playing well. They got a win. That's a good way to respond to a defeat is to win the next game. But I mean, Aberdeen are underperforming as well. Oh, fuck off. Aberdeen are underperforming as well. Aberdeen are underperforming as well. And it is good to see Hearts at the top of the league. Very, very good to see. How long that can continue, we'll have to wait and see it at New Year's Eve when I'm going to do a video on where the teams are at. And that will give us a better idea of going forward. What the second half of the season will hold. I think Celtic again. Same with Man United. Same with Stoke and all the other teams we've mentioned on here. Failure in the transfer market. Plain and simple, they failed in the transfer market to get the players necessary. Yeah, if Hearts lose, we'll have to see how well they will reply. But they have dropped points already this season, and they came out the next game and won. They got a draw last weekend, came out this weekend and won. So they sort of showing the response they needed. But the big test, and this is the big issue at the moment in Scottish football, is the League Cup semi-final doubleheader at Hampden Park. Big issues with that. The Aberdeen are raising concerns about having to play a lunchtime kickoff dead on midday in the Central Belt when the first train from Aberdeen doesn't arrive in Glasgow until 12:15. So that makes no sense. And Hearts, Craig Levein, while I don't particularly like him, has come out and said, well, this is madness. You're going to have 100,000 football fans in Glasgow city centre on the piss. So that could be a security issue. I think that's going to be interesting to see what happens on the 28th of October. There were other options available, but this is because of Celtic's failure to get in the Champions League has caused a lot of these problems. Had they been in the Champions League, they could have played the game on the Saturday. The Celtic Hearts game could have been played on a Saturday. And Aberdeen playing Rangers could have been at a later kickoff time. Obviously, the Scottish Football League and the Scottish FA have really screwed up the TV as well because they're after the TV money. They're not putting the fans first. They've gone after pure greed. The kickoff times make no sense. I think having the games on a Sunday was a mistake. Have them in the midweek. Rearrange the league games or something. But the league president, who's a moron, is citing fixture congestion. You have a winter break in Scotland. Possibly postpone their league games until the winter break and just play them then. It's only one league game that has to be rearranged for both for four teams. It's not the end of the world. They're refusing to budge on it. I can see there being a lot of problems with about 60% of the fans getting to Hampden for the cup semi-final doubleheader. I think it's an insane idea, and I hope the Scottish FA have egg on their face and made it look really stupid. Wow, some good games on today. Bracknell were playing at Streatham this evening. I haven't seen a score on that, so I'm going to have to eat my dinner now because I've been shouted at for 10 minutes rudely because no one can pissing knock on the door. But we'll have to quickly check the old Twitter feed. I've got to do a couple of the videos, so I might do a couple of the videos, get them up. But the stream has been interesting tonight because a lot of them have been football. A lot of football questions, and yeah, a lot of teams are playing later. I have no idea why. Obviously, that's fixturing. That's down to the league. That's down to the clubs agreeing that they want to play their games at these said time slots. And that Bracknell and Streatham is 1-1 after a period of play. So there's that. And what? There was a goal disallowed in that game. So that's interesting. There's been a goal disallowed. So that is an interesting one. It's very rare that goals get called off in the lower level of British ice hockey. But yeah, I think it is down to how the teams wanted to fixture things. They obviously had a meeting with the league. They would have sat down and said, "We want to play these games on these dates at these times." Um, it it's an interesting one, but and they do say the fixture list is subject to change. So I regularly keep up on the um, on the fact that you know a league like this, which doesn't have TV timings, so it's easier to rearrange fixtures as well. I think that's what all the teams agreed. They were happy with having these face-off times. It's obviously to do with getting fans to and from, and obviously players available. Players and officials as well. It's all down to league meetings and things of that sort. Final question. I might do a part two live stream, but I might not. If I'm down south, yeah, I'm down south. Why Blackburn? I chose Blackburn as a kid when I was like 3 years old. I've got family from the northwest, um, but it was one of the first games I watched on TV when I was a kid. One of the first games I watched on TV was a Blackburn game, and it sort of stuck when you're 3, 4 years old, and you know um, it's the first time you're watching the sport. Yeah, it's sort of stuck in about '92, and it's been that way for a long time. 26 years of doing it. Um, it is what it is. I mean, my granddad's a Burnley fan because he listened to Burnley on the radio in the 50s. That is the only reason why he's a Burnley fan. So my cousin's a Yeovil fan because that is the nearest professional team to where he lives. It sometimes it comes down to location, and sometimes it comes down that was the first experience of a sport that said person had. Yeah, Blackburn seemed to suit me, and then of course they went on to win the Premier League and the League Cup. And I'm still supporting him, and that makes me not a glory supporter. Yeah, so I mean, it's a difficult one to explain. Some people it's because their dad, is a fan, or their mum's a fan, or their best mate, growing up was a fan, so they became a fan. Other people, they just watch a game for the first time. They like the style of how that team play, and they go, "Oh, I'll follow this guy." For other people, it's the local team. Um, I've seen a fair few Blackburn games in my time. It's difficult with the distances involved, and the travel and having to pay stupid amounts of money to get to and from the game. But it is what it is, and I'm going to leave that there for now. There will be more videos tonight. I've got to do some prep, so this has got to come off, and then I've got to prep up um, some more videos. But thank you very much for watching this one. We might do a part two. We shall see on that. If not, there'll be a couple more videos going up. And yeah, and yeah, some people say they would watch an event more, but timings hold them back, and that's another issue with some sports and some leagues not getting the exposure overseas. That's why I think a League One and League Two TV deal wouldn't work, because you couldn't sell it abroad. That's where most of the money from the TV deals coming, is the overseas rights for British football, and there's not enough interest outside the club fan base to try and sell those games, unless those clubs end up getting promoted to the Championship and the Premier League, and doing what they need to do on the field. Off the field, they can market things better. But we'll see what happens. Anyway, I'm going to leave that there for now. Thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you're new. And if you watch this later, I do apologise for my relative shouting through the door, because she can't knock on a door because moron reasons. But there we go. I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very much for watching, and I will have a couple more videos to put up, and then we might have another live stream tonight. We probably won't, because I've got to be up at 6 in the morning. But if we do, we do. And obviously keep your eyes peeled. In the week there'll be a couple more videos, possible live streams going up, so keep your eyes peeled, and I'll see you guys soon. There's stream button.